Indigenous peoples have so much to offer, but our implicit biases get in the way, and we all lose out. I'm going to share with you some of the steps I've taken to transform my implicit bias. And to begin, I'm going to invite you to draw a tree. So on your paper or in the air, I'd like you to draw the first tree you think of. Don't worry, no one else will see it. This isn't grade school. So after you've drawn your tree, I'd like you to notice, do you have roots on your tree? Did anyone put roots on their tree? A couple of people. Most people don't. Why is that? We don't see the roots, so we don't think about them. Out of sight, out of mind. Just like the roots, implicit bias runs deep, but we don't think about it. It's invisible to us, but it has so much power. My journey of learning about implicit bias started with this picture. What are the first thoughts you have when you see this picture? Happy, adorable. I didn't hear that one. Proud. Isolated, yeah. So this picture is me, and I am mixed heritage. I have Syilx heritage, as well as I'm fifth-generation settler with German and English heritage. And I so wish that that day that I was standing there in my Auntie Millie's buckskin dress, that I felt those things, that I felt happy, proud, but I didn't. I was so mad. I felt so ashamed. I didn't understand, why did my mom want me to put this dress on? Didn't she know Indigenous peoples were the bad guys? Already at such a young age, I had internalized the dominant narrative that to be Indigenous was to be inferior. And the hard part was that nobody saw that I'd internalized that. It was invisible to them. But it was when I became an adult and I learned to notice and I learned to do different, to see differently, to question. Even standing up here today, I had to go through so much inner narrative, so much counteracting the voice in my head saying, I didn't have anything valuable to share with you. I'm not good enough to be here. But I know better now, and I've learned differently. A big part of my learning has come from my culture, and going to ceremonies with my family, and learning about the incredible wisdom of Indigenous peoples, like this saying, Wai Chiapt. Wai Chiapt means we have all arrived here in this moment, full of possibilities in front of us. And it also means that we are together. We're not alone. We bring a triangle with us. The triangle includes our parents, our grandparents, and our great-grandparents, this long triangle behind us. And it also includes a triangle in front of us of our children, our grandchildren, and our great-grandchildren, and the people to be. And we are the bridge between these two triangles. We are together. This concept is also in our word snach Syilx, which means that we all share one membrane with each other. We share one skin, not only with us as humans, but with all our relations, the land and the water, and all the animals and all the plants, that we are together as one. Snach Syilx is affirmed with our greetings with each other when we don't say, hey, how you doing? We say, are you you? If you're not you, what can we do to bring you to your whole self? We have practices that support these principles of wholeness, such as the Anaukanwich, which is based on our origin story, the 4 food chiefs. And each one of these chiefs has a different attribute that they bring to our community. They all bring diversity of strengths. And it recognizes that to be a whole community, we need the diversity. And we need processes that help bring in the wisdom that comes from sharing our diverse perspectives. These teachings that I learned from my culture really helped me to transform my inner biases, and I started to feel proud. I went from shame to pride. But I still had misconceptions about why do our people struggle so much? And I started learning about the history of colonization and genocide and the horrific things that have happened to my ancestors and that continue to happen today. One of these policies that were the assimilation policy kind of says it all, is that the goal was to rid the Indian of the Indian, that we wanted to not have to deal with the Indian problem anymore. And so some of these policies were upheld by what you call here in the States the Boarding School Act. In Canada, it was the residential schools, where our children, as young as 5, got taken away to these schools, away from their families and communities, forcibly removed by police, and taken away in cattle trucks, like a day's drive from their family. And terrible things happened at these schools. Some of them were, treated like, I liken it to being in prison. When they arrived there, their clothes that they were used to wearing were taken away and given different clothes. Their hair was all cut off. And long hair to Indigenous people means so much. It's very spiritual. And they were given numbers. And they were punished for speaking their language, the only way they knew how to communicate with each other. I can't imagine what that would be like. I'm a mother too. And I imagine, how would you ever survive that? To have your children removed from you and you only got to see them in the summer. Recently in Canada, many unmarked graves have been found. This is the Kamloops Residential School, where many of my ancestors from my community and nation would have gone. And 215 unmarked graves have been found. And that was the first school where the marks were found of missing children that never made it home. Now in Canada, there's over 1,800 across Canada that have been found, and they're still searching. I also found a big part of my transformation was not only learning about the horrible things that have happened to Indigenous people, but a big part of my transformation and learning happened when I learned about my families, my history, especially my great-grandfathers. I want to share this story with you. This is my German grandfather, Frank Sorgi, and that's me with him and his wife, Anne. I just loved hearing about how, he started off, he was born under a wagon in the middle of a winter storm in Nebraska, and his family had moved from Germany to try and make a better life for themselves. And they went bankrupt and left Nebraska in the middle of the night with their 2 wagons and their 7 children to southern Alberta in Canada. And they made a new life for themselves there. And my great-grandfather, Frank, he left on his own to venture out to British Columbia, where he ended up settling. And one of the stories that I love is how when he got there, his first winter was the coldest, and he had a sack of potatoes, and he had a couple buddies with him, and they survived in a chicken shack. And since then, his hard beginnings, he ended up building a big orchard and a life for himself in the valley, and was quite successful. One of the stories that my aunt shared is he was sitting on his rocking chair overlooking his orchard later in his life, and he said, "This is the land of milk and honey." I just want you to internalize that. This is the land of milk and honey. And now I'm going to share a story about my other great-grandfather, Paul. He lived to be over 100 years old. My aunt told me they don't even know how old he lived because they didn't have records back then. But she thinks he was close to 110 years old. And Paul was an incredible survivor, resilient. I just think about all the things he lived through. But one of the stories I want to share with you is how later in his, all these things he went through, of all the changes and the trauma of having children taken out of the community, and 90% of our community was lost to smallpox. He was starting up an orchard after he'd been pushed onto reserve. Imagine living off the land sustainably, having all the foods and living in a good way on the land, to being put on a tiny piece of reserve. So he took up orcharding, fruit orcharding, and after many years, more people started moving into the valley who wanted the water. They needed the water that he was using. So they told him, "You need to get a water license." And of course, an Indigenous person wouldn't even understand that concept of water needing a license. And so he went to apply for a license, and he was denied. But he kept using the water because he said, "I need to feed my family. I'm going to keep using this water." And they ended up throwing him in jail. And when I learned that story, I learned those stories near the same time. And it really made me think about how our lived experiences are so different, yet we hold the same bar for people. And my one great-grandfather was living in a way that he could look at the land and go, "The land of milk and honey." And my other great-grandfather was having his rights violently removed from him. This tree is one of the last standing trees from that orchard, and it's a reminder to our family. When we look at this tree, we think of our great-grandfather and his resiliency and his action that he took to say no. Learning about my grandfathers and learning about all the injustices that have happened to Indigenous people has helped to transform my internalized biases. So I can stand up here today and say I'm proud to be Syilx. I am proud to stand here and tell you about the truth about our people. My hope is that this talk today has helped you to, inspired you to listen, to notice, and to learn. I want to end by asking you to stand. You started with drawing a tree. I'm going to invite you to now stand and pretend you're a tree. So if you could all stand. And if you're comfortable, close your eyes and imagine that you're a tree, and feel the roots coming through your trunk of your body, down through your feet into the floor. And just notice and imagine how it feels to go through the layers of the earth beneath us, to all the lived experiences that have been here before us, all the stories, all the songs, all the incredible wisdom. And notice those roots and the passage of time that has been here before us, and your roots intertwining with those roots. And when you're ready, open your eyes and look around at all the other trees in the forest and imagine how we could be stronger together. We are stronger together when we recognize our roots are all intertwined and we share one skin. Snach Syilx. Lim Lim, thank you.